which is extraordinary to say the least, and I don't use that word lightly. John Rember lives and writes in the Sawtooth Valley of Idaho. Journal of the Plague Years is a 3-volume series of Rember's journal entries written during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. They include Volume 1, Endnotes, Volume 2, Ghost Dance, and Volume 3, Aftermath. When John reached out to me to let me know his newest books were finished and soon to be published, I was excited he had chosen Haley Public Library as a venue to share them. And I know we are all in for a treat. The selections he will read from his newly published Journal of the Plague Years will be in John's words, and he told me this on the phone. So this is a quote. "A pre-holiday celebration of wonder and kindness." Do you remember that? But the one, right. Now, and that's why I use this quote. But with an edge that readers familiar with his work will recognize and appreciate. I am fairly deep into Volume 1, and it is everything I hoped it would be. John's entries put words to an experience in the not-so-distant past that tested all of us in ways we had never wanted to be tested. But in laying bare his and Julie's experiences and layering them with contemplations of honest yet somehow never didactic reflections on the overwhelming reality of the times, John is the perfect witness, blending his signature dark humor with a sense of hope and durable joy, reminding us that life is hard, but that there is joy in everyday life, and especially in how we treat each other in the face of a challenge as great as a pandemic. And I'm grabbing a quote from Volume 1, which I really, really love. In Volume 1, he writes, quote, "We'll all be refugees from grief. The proper response is kindness, not fear. It's a safer way to treat angry and frightened people, for one thing. It's the way to a future where we can hold our heads up for another." After the talk, books will be available for purchase and signing. And please join me in welcoming John Rember.
I'm now unmuted. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. And I've determined that I'm going to try to get by without reading glasses tonight. I printed things out in 14-point type, and with any luck, we'll get through without too many baubles. I had a few notes, and basically I'd like to thank Allison and everyone else at the Haley Library for making this possible, and making this audience possible. So thank you very much, Allison. Thanks, Sarah, for selling some books. And I'd like to thank Julie, my spouse, for making all of this happen, because it wouldn't have happened without her. I wrote down 3 things I thought I would talk about before I started reading. And I didn't write them in 14-point type, so I think what it says is the provinces kept business as usual going after Rome had collapsed. And as we're sitting here in the provinces, after our version of Rome has collapsed, I'm afraid that we're in too much of a similar situation. And that is a little bit of a theme that goes through all 3 of these books. It's kind of the background noise. And I didn't think when I was writing that I was being a prophet, but now when we've got all these books together, some of the things that I was writing look like prophecy. And knowing what happens to prophets, I'm a little nervous. In 2 days, Julie and I are doing a small program at the Stanley Library, and it's titled How to Write and Self-Publish a Book in 5 Quick Years. So if you're interested in that, it's only a hazardous hour and a half away. And the third thing I wrote down is a witness is needed once it gets hard to tell what is true. And that witness is the kind of witness that I've tried to be here. And that's simply somebody who believes that there's a real world out there that can be apprehended by our senses, and with a fair amount of integrity, you can render that world into words, as long as you promise yourself you're going to try to tell the truth. So, going to start with a piece called Holiday Sermon, and you'll be happy to know this is not a religious sermon, it's a secular sermon, and it has to do with something I'm going to touch on again and again tonight, which is our faith in science and how important it is. Okay, here we go. Wrote this on December 28th, 2020. It was at the end of a hard year. The pandemic had come in March, and we had taken all those years, or all those days of uncertainty to heart. We seem to have forgotten a bunch of them now, and this will remind you of them. Christmas dinner was a solemn affair this year, mainly because Julie and Juno and I were the only guests. Normally we have a house full, or friends who have a house full, and we're part of it. Laughter and kitchen noise and happy greetings make up our usual Christmas soundscape. This Christmas, in what seemed like an empty house, we wished others were with us. Nobody among close friends and family has died of the pandemic, but our solitude reminded us that there are people once close we will never see again. In the absence of loud and happy conversation, people we hadn't seen or thought of for a long time crept into the silences. Several times in the past year, when I put the name of an old acquaintance into a search engine, I found an obituary. It was a shock every time, even though I can read the actuarial tables as well as anybody. Julie and I and Juno did a Christmas ski into Redfish Lake Lodge during the late afternoon. We had to wait for Julie's pie to come out of the oven, so by the time we got on the snow, the day was getting darker. When we reached the Redfish docks, a snowstorm was hovering over the peaks. The dark chased us to the car. Once home, Julie got serious with dinner. Juno went to sleep on the floor in front of the wood stove. The menu: grilled leg of lamb, roasted garlic potatoes, kale and arugula salad with pine nuts, a 2016 California Zinfandel, port or brandy, apple pie, black coffee, and a movie, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. We made it as far as the Zinfandel. I did get the dishes done before I fell into bed. Although it's not listed, guilt was on our Christmas menu. This year has brought with it too many lives ended, jobs and homes lost, careers destroyed, hopes dashed. We find ourselves dismayed that our country consistently ignores when it doesn't deliberately harm the poor people within its borders. We know that our Christmas dinner, all paid for, consumed under our own roof, with enough left over for Boxing Day, puts us among a fortunate minority of Americans. Our economy has become a zero-sum game, and this winter, if you watch the news, having enough can feel like a crime. At the same time, we fear the sudden change of circumstance that could render our happiness into grief, our savings into worthless paper, our health into sickness, our world into ruins. Both of us absorbed the deep lessons of Depression-era parents and grandparents. Work hard, save as much as possible, use it up, wear it out, make it do, never buy new. Both of us absorbed the even deeper lessons of the Cold War and the AIDS epidemic and of nursing homes. In the end, other people make your life and death decisions for you. You can do everything you're supposed to do and still have no idea whether your virtuous, well-planned, well-deserved life will last the week. Here's the mantra. It's not up to you. It's never been up to you. It will never be up to you. That doesn't mean you can't feel guilty about it. Julie and I have spent 30 years in the muddy terrain between the guilt of having a good life we don't really deserve and the anxiety of losing it through no fault of our own. Yet life remains interesting and full of joy. It's a contradiction. We live with it. A week before Christmas, we cut a small, skinny tree from a thicket of lodgepole out by the river. We decorated it with lights, strings of beads, and the ornaments that Julie's grandparents gave her over the years she was growing up. We attached red velvet bows to the ends of branches, wrapped the tree holder in a brocaded cloth, and turned on the lights. It looked just like all the other Christmas trees we've decorated over the years. Now and then we get a new ornament as a gift, and this year Julie made a needlepoint snowman that sits up near the top. But anyone seeing our tree this year would have trouble distinguishing between it and any of the other trees over the last 20 years. Dr. Seuss could claim them all as his own. We called it good. We called it funny looking. We called it beautiful. In our house, all those things go pretty well together. We finally did watch A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood on Boxing Day. It's a movie about Fred Rogers, whose television show for young children, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, was the subject of parody and ridicule for its general sappiness. But it was also a program that met tiny children on their own turf. It was designed to address what worried them, what made them angry or confused, and what made them happy. Fred Rogers had figured out that few children, even ones raised in privileged homes, were allowed to have real selves in real time. They get damaged by families who love them for whom they are expected to be, not for whom they are. In every episode, though, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood treated them like real people. For many of these children, it was the first step of a lifetime project of realizing they were a person. The movie made it clear that Fred Rogers, a Christian minister, practiced Christian charity, which simply meant that he genuinely loved his fellow humans, and when he had the opportunity, he acted on that love. The movie also made it clear that living a life according to the golden rule isn't easy. It takes time, sweat, tears, and pain, but it's likely the only path most of us have to any kind of earthly happiness. It means you allow the people around you to have real selves in real time. It's good for them, and the company of real people is good for you. One of the lines in the movie referred to the idea widespread across cultures and countries that just about the time you learn how to live, you get old and die. It might be more accurate to say that when the evidence becomes overwhelming that you're mortal, you become open to the idea that life isn't all getting and spending, winning and losing, righting wrongs, and making sure you've justified your life exactly as you've lived it. These things are crushing burdens for human beings. And any idea that counters them, such as the soul being a process, one that by definition will never be completed, that idea comes as a happy and freeing revelation. I used to tell my student advisees, usually when they had come back from a family funeral and were in their first away-from-home existential crisis, that regardless of what happened after death, death itself was a major change in perspective. You couldn't expect to go through with it and not have a period of serious adjustment if you had anything left to adjust. My students were oddly comforted by this view of things, mainly because religious dogma fails pretty badly at funerals. Conventional certainties about eternal life don't fare well in the face of an open casket. My own view of the afterlife is not marked by any certainty whatsoever. At times, I do speculate that everybody gets to go to heaven after death. And heaven is an indefinite period of examining from a cosmic perspective every evil thing you ever did. You get to relive every anger, every easy way out, every mean thought, every bit of sloth, avarice, self-righteousness, greed, envy, lust, and gluttony, all from a position of knowing better. I've been proceeding on the hope that you get time off if you start early. Heaven gets bearable when you finally own up to your sins, understand why you committed them, and know that if you can help it, you won't commit any of them again. Science is a method of questioning reality, and as such, it gives us many more questions than answers. Didactic images of the afterlife fall apart in the face of the laws of thermodynamics. Wine is much more likely to turn to water than the other way around. Walls don't tumble down at the blow of a horn. Snakes don't talk. People cast into fiery furnaces do not walk out unharmed. Demonic possession is a real thing, but the demons turn out to be brutal ancestors, their sins cascading onto the heads of their descendants through 7 generations. Resurrection and eternal life, still awaiting scientific evidence. Happily, you don't have to believe Christ exists to behave like him. You don't have to prove God exists if God is love. In the presence of love, the eternal starts edging into our lives. If you're looking for certainty in this world, there's plenty of it on your own plate in the choices you make to be kind or not. 400,000 more Americans died in 2020 than died in 2019. The number is evidence enough that business as usual will not occur for a while. 400,000. No science of grief exists to quantify the effect those deaths had on the families fragmented by them, but none is needed. The grief is there, enormous and unmoving. There's no explaining it away. You can refuse to share it, but only at the cost of ignoring the truth that one of those grieving families could be yours. Will be yours. Grief is woven into the fabric of human existence. Loss is the price of having love in your life. Fred Rogers was able to value and respect little kids as they were when he was talking to them. For a lot of them, that was the moment they snapped into personhood. To have someone focus on who you are and what you're trying to express seems essential for human development, judging from the amount of people walking around who never developed. We owe it to ourselves to pay attention to each other, if only so we can live in a world where if you look at a human, you can expect somebody to be in there. There's room for mercy in our response to the grieving, even if it's only to say, what you are feeling is real. I'm sorry this happened to you. I will grieve with you so you won't be alone in your grief. That sort of thing won't save the world, but it will make your part of it a friendlier place. I I never really wanted to be a preacher, but, you know, obviously some part of me did. I was going to read a piece called Death and Retribution next, but I'm not, because we had to put this off a week, and that put us into December, and that put us too close to Christmas. And it had a friend of mine gave that a much better title. It was called Rush Limbaugh in Hell. And it was all about bullying and the fact that all sorts of people remember exactly what bullies did to them. And the bullies never remember. Go figure. I guess being a bully means a life where whatever you do sort of fades into the past, and you look for the next victim. Anyway, that's more than you wanted to know about that. This is called Luck, and it's I started my teaching career at the community school in Ketchum, and this is a little bit of a story about that, because I got put in classes that I didn't know anything about teaching. All of them, in fact. So, July 4th, 2022, I was 24 years old when I started teaching at the community school in Ketchum, Idaho. I taught 7th and 8th graders to write, 11th graders to read, and because the science teacher was overburdened, I took an 8th grade science class. I was also the assistant soccer coach, even though I knew nothing about soccer, and the outdoor program advisor, even though I didn't know enough about the behavior of adolescents in the outdoors. Nobody does. The community school was a startup. Its headmaster had been the principal of Hemingway Elementary School in Ketchum, but he only had a provisional certificate, and he had been spat out by the Idaho educational bureaucracy when he failed to take the classes required for formal certification. He'd been a popular administrator. Enough parents opposed his firing that he was able to start, on a wing and a prayer and a smoldering sense of injustice, his own private school. It was a long-shot endeavor, but it had wealth behind it. By the time I was hired, the school was moving into a new building, growing an endowment, and adding a new grade every fall. When our 11th graders became seniors, we would have a full 7 to 12 curriculum, and I would become, in addition to my other duties, the college counselor. I taught grammar and read short stories with my younger students, and I finally learned the structure of my native language. I learned how to give feedback without discouragement, and with my 11th graders, I learned the American literary canon. I was up late most nights, studying harder than I ever had, trying to stay ahead of my students, learning what I should have learned in high school and college. If you want to find out how much you didn't learn the first time around, teach. It's a humbling experience going into a classroom to teach something you've just barely learned, but most of the time it works. I didn't know much about a science book, as the song goes. But when I stood in front of my 8th graders for the first time, my ignorance wasn't a complete liability. I had completed my undergraduate science requirement by taking geology. I'd barely gotten my gentleman's B- by learning enough geochemistry to know that some bonds between molecules are stronger than others, and those bonds vary over a spectrum of temperature and pressure. I've remembered that over almost 5 decades, because it's a handy metaphor for a variety of human connections, not because I learned anything about chemistry. My professor was the scientist and writer Stephen Jay Gould. He taught by osmosis. By sitting in his class, you absorbed a worldview that included wonder in the face of new data and a healthy suspicion of anybody's prior expertise, including your own. He taught science as an open-ended subject, one where an unexpected result could upend your entire project, damage your career, and wreck cherished schools of thought. He said this was a good thing. He also taught the scientific method as the only way you could know the real world. Otherwise, the imperfect human brain, high on dopamine, illusions, politics, instinctual fears, and received superstitions, could trick you into believing in a world that didn't exist. You could base your whole life on a complex of lies. The only problem with the scientific method was that it could take years to know what a scientific fact really was. That light could be both a particle and a wave, for instance. And you might spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what that fact meant. It was luck that handed me a room full of 8th grade science students, and luck that I had no curriculum, no textbook titled Earth Science, and no sense that 8th graders were too young for any material I could come up with. I told my students about eccentric 19th century British naturalists who turned their libraries and living rooms into museums and who considered their field studies, however haphazard, to be contributions to cutting-edge scientists. We would do the same. I had ordered blank books for the class, and I passed one out to each student. This book is your scientific notebook. It's proof you're a reliable witness to the world, I said. Keep it neat, but not that neat. Write down what you see and hear. Draw what you see. You can press leaves and flowers between its pages. Write down every question that lets you look deeper into the world. You're an observer, and science starts and ends with observation. I also handed out a few pages from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, wherein the author, Robert Pirsig, lays out the scientific method. Pirsig, after describing how observation results in hypothesis, hypothesis results in experiment, and experiment results in theory, affirms that the scientific method is slow, too slow for most people's patience. But if you really want to know the world, it's the best tool you've got. I didn't subject my students to Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, but it was in my library, and I read and reread it before our field trips every class period that fall that had survivable weather. I emphasized to the class Kuhn's idea that science progressed not by finding answers to questions, but by asking questions no one had thought of before. I repeated his idea that Einstein's theories had to wait until a whole generation of classical physicists were killed off in World War I before people would accept what he said as science. Without knowing much about Einstein, I told him he had inspired thought experiments that had young people in starships returning to Earth to find that all their friends had died of old age. That got them excited, looking at each other and imagining each other as old. I gave them the gambler's version of the laws of thermodynamics. You can't win the game, you can't break even in the game, and you can't get out of the game. 8th graders, being 13 years old, did not take well to these rules. I told them if they refused to believe me, we'd construct perpetual motion machines and take them to the National Science Fair and save an energy-starved world. None of our perpetual motion machines worked, which was a good introduction to our next text, which I'd found in a Boise bookstore the previous summer. It was a spin-off from the Club of Rome's The Limits to Growth, which had come out my senior year of college. Limits was a study of population and resources. It said you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. I can't remember the title of our spin-off textbook. I can't find it in my library. I've tried to research it on the internet, and I'm still searching. If I've loaned it out to anyone reading this, please bring it back. The book is a close examination of the sustainable energy avenues that were available to civilization in 1974. These included maximum expansion of hydroelectric dams, tidal energy, solar wind, biomass, fusion, 30 years away in 74, 30 years away now. Gulf Stream turbines, geothermal plants, orbiting solar panels, and something that looked much like Nikola Tesla's plan for the Earth to be used as a giant electrical generator. Included were estimates on cost and time of completion. Everything was to be up and running by the year 2000. Looking back, some of those energy schemes look impractical or dependent on yet to be invented technology. But enough of them would have worked that had they been implemented across the world, civilization would by now be largely free from the lethal effects of fossil fuel. At the end of the semester, the class notebooks came in. Some of them were scribbled chaos, and some of them were far too neat, but they were all the work of people who had been witnesses to the world. They had taken their work seriously. For one semester in their lives, a class of 13-year-olds in Idaho had a fair amount in common with Stephen Jay Gould. It was a great class. I can't believe I got away with it. I can't believe I told privileged white kids at an Idaho ski resort that their world was doomed unless their generation and mine saved it. We were humanity's last chance, I said. It was now or never. I can't believe I said that in 1974 when it was probably already too late. Fix this or die projection had already been made in 1972 when The Limits to Growth was published. Jimmy Carter was the only U.S. president who took his job seriously enough that he tried to save his people and their country from their own appetites, and he failed miserably. There's tragedy here, and it lies in the fact that on a minor planet orbiting a minor star on a minor arm of a giant spiral galaxy, a species evolved enough sentience to discover the laws of physics and build a civilization and create works of art and music that are stunning in their beauty and complexity and promise. But that same species ignored its own discovery, in some cases passed laws against the laws of physics, and reverted to a point in its history where science hadn't been invented yet. Humans came to value conviction more than observation, the subjective over the objective, and a soporific self-indulgence over basic self-awareness. Little wonder that humans wrecked their planet instead of recognizing they would need it as a place to live. My science class ended after one semester. A new science teacher was hired for spring, and I went back to teaching people to read and write. I took what I had learned from teaching science into my literature classes. To the extent I could, I turned literature into a scientific phenomenon, one worthy of deep examination, one whose anomalies and flourishes served a larger whole, the meaning of which was reserved for further study. It was not saving the world, but I like to think it allowed my literature students more purposeful and happier lives. I don't know that any of my students became resource and population activists. A lot of them have had children, and some of them have had grandchildren despite what they learned in 8th grade population studies. Like a lot of humans, including me, they rebel against the laws of physics, even if they no longer need the theory of relativity to see each other as old. As for me, I'm hoping to stay ahead of entropy, at least until the photos that have come back from the James Webb Space Telescope are published. This was in 2022. That's 8 days from now. And it will be an occasion that stands in triumphant opposition to millennia of humanity's reptilian death wishes. The data James Webb is beaming back to Earth will certify humans as one of the great species of the cosmos, one capable of brilliant engineering, overwhelming curiosity, boundless imagination, and a desire to live and explore the universe as an exercise in intellectual joy. one imagines aliens on an expedition to our sun and planets, finding the James Webb telescope drifting out among the asteroids and pulling it into their ship and examining it. It's a little worse for 100,000 years of micrometeorite impacts, but it's still magnificent and glittering, and the aliens immediately recognize it as an artifact of galaxy-class minds. It's a time machine, the chief scientist of the aliens will say. They wanted to see back to the beginnings of things, and they got close. Way smarter than we thought they were, the assistant to the chief alien scientist will say, some of them, but they were still primates, tribes, dominant males, intraspecies warfare, the whole depressing business. They were toast before they got out of the gate. They will shrug, or they would shrug if they had shoulders, and pack the James Webb away with their other souvenirs, the Picassos and Rembrandts and Gutenberg Bibles, and the 57 T-Bird and Clovis Points and the flash blackened Stradivarius and the recordings of Hitchcock movies and Brubeck and Beethoven and Martin Luther King Jr. Then they'll head out in the direction of Andromeda, looking once again for somebody that they can share their notebooks with. I managed to lose a page, but I remembered what was on the last. Okay, keeping with the theme, this one is called Andromeda. It's the last I'll read tonight, and I hope it will make your Christmas a little merrier, or if not merrier, a little more awestruck. May 8th, 2023. I'm reading one piece from each one of these books. So that was the first one. This was the third one. This was the second one. And this was the third one. If you put all these together and you have a door that won't stay in place, you can use them. Okay, Andromeda, the galaxy, not the beautiful Greek princess who gave it its name. But, okay, let's look at Andromeda, the princess. Because human beauty made the gods jealous, she was chained, naked to a rock in the ocean, destined to be devoured by a sea monster. But the Greek hero, Perseus, killed the monster with his sword, rescued Andromeda, married her, and had 7 sons and 2 daughters with her. Neither of the daughters, Autochtha or Gorgophone, ended up chained to rocks, possibly because they weren't as beautiful as their mother, possibly because the gods thought their names were enough punishment. The galaxy. Its enhanced photo serves as a backdrop to my computer screen. It's 2.5 million light years from Earth, has a diameter of 250,000 light years, and is heading toward us at 72 miles per second. It will merge with our Milky Way in 5 to 10 billion years. For most of the merger, our sun will be a white dwarf. Andromeda is the most distant thing you can see with the naked eye, if you have a clear night and no cataracts. Andromeda contains 1 trillion stars. From the perspective of the Hubble and James Webb space telescopes and the Very Large Array radio telescope, it is pure light framed by the blackness of space. Tendrils of dust swirl around a bright center, and false color images keyed to radio, ultraviolet, infrared, and X-ray spectra reveal luminous rings, swirls, shadows, chasms, maelstroms, and the fading embers of exploded suns. It is a realm of beauty so far distant from the human that if, as some cosmologists speculate, the universe is the mind of God, the only possible attitude God could have toward humans is a preference for something more imposing and less depressing. Andromeda reminds me that in this universe, I don't amount to a hill of beans, or even one bean, or even a molecule of bean protein. That's true at any stage of my life, and it would be true no matter how much I might have accomplished in an alternate life. President, the Medal of Honor, Nobel Prize in Medicine, Eagle Scout, 33 degrees, Mason, Cardinal, Commissar. These mean nothing compared to that dim and fuzzy little cloud in our night sky. If 2/3 of its trillion stars have planets, and 1 in 100 of those planets have conditions that have given rise to life, and 1 in 100 of those develop intelligent life, and 1 in 100 of those avoid atomic, biological, and chemical warfare long enough to construct a civilization kinder and gentler than our own, God would have 667,000 happier places to think about whenever he gets introspective. Andromeda is only one of billions and maybe trillions of galaxies. There's no end to them as far as anybody has been able to tell. After a long and cold winter in Sawtooth Valley, Julie and I packed suitcases and a cooler and headed south to Twin Falls, and then to Pocatello, and then to Lava Hot Springs and the Riverside Hotel. The Riverside is a good place to start a road trip. It was built in 1914 and is a little worse for a century plus of wear, but it has a good restaurant on the ground floor, rooms with high ceilings and soft mattresses, and the hot pools are just a block away. We try to visit every 6 months or so. At the pools, the water comes out of the ground at 112 degrees. It's hard to stay in the hottest pool for more than a few minutes. Fortunately, the next pool is only 106 or so, and then 2 large jacuzzi pools at 104, and then a big cool pool that's only 100. The last is the most crowded, so Julie and I stay in one of the jacuzzi pools. If we get too hot, we sit on the pool edge until we cool off. Julie and I spent an hour letting the hot water melt the months of cold weather that had seeped into our bones. It had been a good winter with lots of backcountry skiing and enough solitude to see us through the coming frenzy of tourist season. But we were ready for warmth and the laughter of our fellow humans. A wide variety of humans shared the pools with us. Julie and I weren't the oldest or the biggest or the most beautiful. The atmosphere was insular. Laughter was at a minimum for a place so dedicated to having fun. People had created their own little islands, looking inward, even when they were the only person in the group. Even if we put the pandemic out of our minds, it's changed the direction of our gaze, no matter the social setting. We went back to the hotel for a glass of wine before dinner. The restaurant was short-handed. Service was slow, but we weren't in a hurry. The food was good. It conspired with the long hours in the car and the hot water and the wine to make an early evening seem like a late one. We staggered upstairs and went to sleep. At daylight, we got up and headed for Utah. What, you might ask, has Utah got to do with a galaxy far, far away? Only this. Utah rests on layers and layers of sand deposited at the bottom of a shallow sea that stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean hundreds of millions of years ago. That sand is now the sandstones of the arid Carmel, Temple Cap, Navajo, and Kayenta formations, most of them containing fossils of long extinct marine species. Utah is to our sense of time what Andromeda is to our perception of space. The stone in the Utah desert is evidence that the earth was old even before life crawled out of the seas, and before that it was cold dust drifting in space. Before that, the theories of cosmologists are labeled, "Here there be monsters." The petroglyphs on a rock wall outside of Moab take us 1,000 years in the past. The rock itself pulls us back millions of years further, billions, if we start thinking about how its silicon and oxygen were formed. And if we take an imaginative leap into the geological future, that rock wall becomes a cloud of suspended mud in a Colorado River whose dams have eroded to nothing, heading for the open water between the island of California and the stumps of the Rocky Mountains. That timeline does not leave a lot of space for a human life. That future hasn't happened yet, and we can't get there from here anyway. We can't even occupy the present. Research has indicated that by the time we experience something, neural delays guarantee that the experience is already over. After a few days in Moab and Bluff, we ended up in the Farview Hotel at Mesa Verde National Park. It had only been open for a week, and big parts of Mesa Verde were closed, but we got some good hikes in, saw the abandoned great houses of the ancestral Pueblans, and had dinner in a vast, near-empty restaurant. After dinner, we returned to our room. It was too cold and windy to sit out on our balcony, but the air was crystal clear. From the big south-facing window in our room, we could see a sky full of stars, reaching down until they met the lights of Farmington, New Mexico, 40 miles away. It was hard to see where the sky ended and the lights of the city began. Farmington looks a lot bigger as a galaxy. We would have required a map of the heavens to find Andromeda, but it was up there somewhere, if its 2.5 million year old light has any relationship to its present existence. We left in the morning. The first busloads of tour groups were due that afternoon. On our way home, we visited the quarry at Dinosaur National Monument on the Utah-Colorado border. It's a rock face filled with half-excavated dinosaur bones enclosed in a big barn-like building. Inside, you walk on 2 levels, each of them allowing a close look at hundreds of individual bones. 149 years ago, a bend in a long extinct river collected and then silted over hundreds of corpses. That those dinosaurs died long before a meteor ended all the dinosaurs, something else got them. It could have been a pandemic. We were taken aback by the presence of a bus from a Bible college in the parking lot, remembering that Bishop James Ussher's biblical arithmetic placed the creation 4,004 years before the birth of Christ. Fundamentalist Christians of the sort Bible colleges turn out tend not to have that much truck with fossils, usually seeing them as Satan-faked artifacts designed to dupe humans into the tooth and claw hell of Darwinism. But nobody looking at the bones seemed particularly offended, and I thought that maybe by exposing its students to 149 million years of history, the Bible College was giving them an idea of what eternity looked like and the amount of time they could look forward to if they behaved themselves. At that point in our road trip, Julie and I had spent 9 days together. Although we were still enjoying each other's company, we both wanted to get home, brew ourselves a cup of tea, and sit alone with it on opposite ends of the house, quietly trying to make sense of the jumble of images in our memories. We have been together for 31 years, which is a lot of road trips. I'll update that, 33 years. It's a lot of road trips, a lot of thinking about time and space, and a lot of time and space together. Julie says that given the chance, she would turn down immortality. She says that after a few centuries, she would get tired and bored. When she puts it like that, I think that no matter how well eternity started out, 1 million years in, you might start looking at the next eon with dread. What saving grace do you have as a human facing the infinite? consciousness, the sense of being small but alive, the ability to trust your eyes and ears, even if what they report is beyond your understanding. An appreciation of the human arena, which includes stories of mortal men and women doing the best they can as they grapple with jealous, petty, and sadistic gods and the second-rate monsters those gods send humanity's way. The dark side of consciousness is that it's a shrink-to-fit phenomenon. Unless you're careful, the universe ends up the size of your mind rather than the size of your perceptions. That's a reduction in reality so extreme it amounts to psychosis. That's why road trips are a necessity. They keep your mind from disappearing into tiny, ever more irrelevant distractions, even as they show you spaces and times you can't comprehend. They do make consciousness a lot more difficult than watching television. The last day of our trip, we hit the Twin Falls Costco and drove the final couple of hours to Sawtooth Valley. We were happy to reach the 1,000 square feet of our home, which seemed about the right size to us. For the moment, we were grateful for the human version of Andromeda, the princess, and for monsters puny enough to be denied their breakfasts. The beauty of the princess had become preferable to that of the galaxy. At least it had for Julie and me for a little while. Two people who have, over the years, come to cherish our mortal existence. That's it.
I like that you checked your watch, but we probably, do you want to take a question or two? We probably have just a few minutes.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
John, would you repeat the question when you get it so
I
that
certainly
our audience
will.
on there can do it? Thank you. Go ahead. In your second essay, you talked about the alien leader and his and its or her or their reaction to the humans. Right now, there's a so-called comet called Atlas. And what you wrote about seems to prophesy what might be happening with that, because there's one Harvard professor who believes there is an alien spaceship. Have you read about that?
I've been following that, and I would caution you, be careful of what you believe from Harvard professors. You know, yeah. In any, the first one of those was Mama, or Your Mama, or whatever it's called. But that same professor made quite a lot of headlines by saying this, what was supposedly a chunk of rock, sped up as it was leaving our solar system, and the jury on that is going to be out until the aliens come. So I don't know. There are all sorts of explanations that can be provided for these extra solar system objects, but it does remind us that there's a lot out there that we don't know about, and you know, that's what makes, for me, that's what makes science so exciting. And you know, my grandmother lived here in Haley and was a brilliant woman who she had a library of really interesting books, and she was self-educated, but she believed in science and passed that on to me. But I remember her saying toward the end of her life that she really didn't mind dying, but she really minded not being able to find out what was going to happen. she really wanted to find out. And that's the trouble with getting old and dying is you know, there's some exciting things coming down the pike, and chances are in 150 years we're probably none of us are going to be here to see them. Yeah, well, you know, it's a chance that, you know, unless you're a billionaire. So, another question? I'm sorry I didn't repeat your question, but I hope people can gather from my answer that you were talking about extra solar system objects swooping in and all of the hoopla that came with it. Okay. No more question? Oh, yes. Julie's right there. Yeah. Tony. Okay. Well, Tony has asked a lot about what's the process that allows these things to happen. What's the writing process? And thank goodness you said it's not the way it appears, because it's not effortless, and it is extremely frustrating at times, because we're in a situation right now where the truth is under attack in this country, and when I started looking at these as maybe more than just what I scribbled down on Mondays or Sundays so I could publish on Mondays on my blog, I decided that we really underestimate the figure of the witness. And yet it's this huge part of our legal system, and it's a mythic figure. If you look at a lot of the myths and legends that we have, they don't happen without a witness. And sometimes the witness is the most important figure in those stories. So our stories make the witness very important, even if our contemporary situation has turned witnesses into sort of zombies in front of a screen. They don't have the same or obligation of consciousness that witnesses have had in the past. So I tried to bring that obligation of consciousness back, and that's you know, you get to be my age and you start wondering, well, what you did, and is there any legacy at all? And realistically, speaking as a witness, you know, most people have no legacy after 4 or 5 generations. We don't even know their names. But for what it's worth, I wrote these books assuming that I was going to put them in an aluminum box and put them in a hillside someplace next to what might be an agricultural village in 500 years. And that was going to be my audience, all these people 500 years in the future who knew what a hash we had made of things, you know, and I wanted at least one person to be, in their minds, a thinking person. That was what I did. As far as writing is concerned, I did spend quite a lot of time writing for Travel and Leisure and the ski magazines as a travel writer, and that came in really handy when we went on road trips. You know, when you're a travel writer, you get you don't stop and enjoy your vacation like people think you do. You're a nervous wreck. You're trying to figure out something worth reporting, and you know that. So I wasn't a real big success as a travel writer, but it did teach me that. Gary, sorry. Well, thank you. I won't repeat that for the benefit of the YouTube audience, but thank you.
All right.
Okay, Julie is tapping her watch, and
I think that was it, and I will repeat that I am almost finished with Volume 1 as well, and I 100% agree. So don't buy them all because I need at least 2 copies. But thank you so much. There are a lot more than 2.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually get them for Christmas gifts, which I know is kind of, but that's my family. I have people in my family who will greatly enjoy those.
Well,
so
we've
thank
got
you.
lots of books. In fact, I think we've got about 300 at home.
Good. Perfect.
And as Thoreau said, I wrote them all myself.
Thank you so much.
Right,
This is
thank you.
great.